Hello everyone, and welcome back to another video from our channel LF Tribute. In this video, we'll be highlighting American celebrities who have passed away today and in the last few days, along with other notable figures from around the world.
Bianca Diaz, a Brazilian content creator with nearly 60,000 followers on Instagram, passed away on February 19th. Known for her modeling and lifestyle content, Diaz had recently documented a trip to London in late 2025. Her last post appeared on December 18th, a simple selfie inside a car in Sao Paulo. No one knew it would be her last. Friends quickly took to social media to share the news. Close friend Giovanna Borges revealed that Diaz had recently undergone cosmetic surgery and had been recovering at home when her condition suddenly took a turn. She had a pulmonary clot, suffered 2 seizures, and by the time she arrived at the hospital, she was no longer alive. Eric Dane, Grey's Anatomy's beloved McSteamy, died on February 19th, less than a year after he publicly disclosed his diagnosis of amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. He was 53. Dane made his Grey's debut exactly 20 years before his death on season 2 of the medical drama. He played hunky plastic surgeon Dr. Mark Sloan and soon became a series regular and a fan-favorite character. His other credits include the shows Euphoria, Charmed, and Gideon's Crossing, and the films X-Men, The Last Stand, Burlesque, Valentine's Day, Marley and Me, and The Last Ship. Lil Papa, the prolific Georgia rapper who scored hits with songs like Love and War and Purple Hearts, died on February 18th at the age of 25. The Jacksonville-based musician, born Janarius Michael Wheeler, broke out with the 2016 single Fall Off when he was only 15. He proceeded to release numerous singles, albums, and mixtapes, signing to No Fake Love rapper Yo Gotti's collective music group Imprint. Robert Duvall, the legendary actor who starred in films like Apocalypse Now and the television series Lonesome Dove, died on February 15th at the age of 95. His wife, Luciana Pedraza, announced the news via social media, writing that the actor passed away peacefully at home, surrounded by love and comfort. Duvall received numerous accolades for his work, including an Academy Award, 2 Emmy Awards, and 4 Golden Globes. Drummer Tim Very's bandmates in the American indie rock band Manchester Orchestra announced Very died on February 14th at the age of 42. No cause of death was given at the time. Very was remembered by bandmates Andy Hall, Robert McDowell, and Andy Prince as an undeniable light that was only matched by his dedication and love for the craft that he was clearly put on earth to do. The son of a drummer, Very played on 4 Manchester Orchestra albums since he joined the band in 2011. Cass Lell, and starred on the freeform reality series Grand Cayman: Secrets in Paradise, died on February 11th at 34. Born in 1991 and raised in Vancouver, Lell moved in 2016 to the Cayman Islands. There she founded the marketing agency Electric Media Group and eventually joined the cast of Grand Cayman, which ran for 1 season on Freeform in 2024. Bud Cort, the character actor who starred in Harold and Ma, died on February 11th at 77. After a small but notable role in Robert Altman's MASH film, he played the lead in Brewster McCloud before headlining the quirky comedy Harold and Ma. The film followed his character Harold's May-December friendship turned romance with Ruth Warden's 79-year-old Holocaust survivor Ma. Cort later appeared in Heat, Dogma, But I'm a Cheerleader, Coyote Ugly, and The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou. Dawson's Creek star James Van Der Beek died on February 11th after a battle with colorectal cancer. He was 48. Van Der Beek played the lead role of Dawson Leary in the teen drama for 6 seasons from 1998 to 2003, alongside Katie Holmes, Michelle Williams, and Joshua Jackson. On television, he later played a fictionalized version of himself in Don't Trust the Bee in Apartment 23, and made memorable appearances on shows like How I Met Your Mother, One Tree Hill, Mercy, Friends with Better Lives, Pose, and Overcompensating. He also competed on Dancing with the Stars and The Masked Singer. The father of 6 also starred in the films Varsity Blues, The Rules of Attraction, Texas Rangers, Downsizing, and Bad Hair, plus cameos in Scary Movie and Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back.
Blake Garrett, who co-starred in the 2006 movie How to Eat Fried Worms, died on February 8th. He was 33. The film was adapted from the beloved 1973 children's book by Thomas Rockwell. As a child, Garrett had also toured with Barney, the iconic purple dinosaur, and appeared in Barney's Colorful World live in 2004. Brad Arnold, the lead singer and longest-tenured founding member of the hard rock band Three Doors Down, died at 47 on February 7th, following a battle with cancer. Arnold wrote the group's biggest single, Kryptonite, during algebra class in his senior year of high school. The track helped launch the band's debut album, The Better Life, to massive success in 2000. Three Doors Down went on to release 5 more albums between 2002 and 2016, with 2 of them reaching the #1 spot on the Billboard 200 chart. Three Dog Night founding member Chuck Negron died at 83 on February 2nd. The vocal trio went on to become one of the most popular bands of the late 60s and 70s, recording 10 albums and releasing songs like Joy to the World, 1, and Old-Fashioned Love Song, with Negron on lead vocals. He also launched his own solo career in 1995, releasing 7 albums and actively touring until the COVID-19 pandemic. Carlos Irwin Estevez was born on September 3, 1965 in New York City, the third of 4 children born to actor Martin Sheen and artist Janet Templeton. His father, born Ramon Antonio Gerard Estevez, had already begun carving out a name for himself in Hollywood, and the family carried with them both the weight of ambition and the warmth of a close-knit household rooted in deep Catholic faith. Charlie would grow up watching his father work, absorbing the rhythms of performance and storytelling from a very early age, understanding almost instinctively that acting was not merely a profession in the Estevez household. It was something closer to a calling, a way of making sense of the world. The family eventually relocated to Malibu, California, where Charlie spent the bulk of his formative years. Life in Malibu in the late 1960s and throughout the 1970s was both sun-drenched and creatively charged, and the Estevezes grew up in an environment that valued artistic expression while also demanding a certain groundedness. Charlie was surrounded by siblings who would also find their way into entertainment. His older brother, Emilio Estevez, would become an actor and filmmaker. His younger brother, Ramon Estevez, would pursue acting as well, and his sister, Renee Estevez, would follow a similar path. It was a household where talent was assumed, where dinner table conversations might easily turn toward philosophy, art, or the latest news from a film set, and where the children understood that their father's work was serious and meaningful. Charlie attended Santa Monica High School, a public school in California that happened to also count among its alumni a remarkable number of future entertainers and artists. It was there that he first began acting in school productions, and it was also there that he formed a friendship with a group of peers that would shape the early chapters of his career. Among his closest friends at Santa Monica High were Rob Lowe, Sean Penn, and Chris Penn, young men who would all go on to major careers of their own, and whose collective ambition created a kind of gravitational field that pulled each of them forward. The group shared a hunger for the craft, a desire to be taken seriously as actors, and a willingness to compete with one another in the most productive sense of the word. Even in those early years, Charlie demonstrated a personality that was simultaneously magnetic and combustible. He was charming, quick-witted, and capable of commanding a room with very little effort. His father's influence was visible not only in his interest in acting, but also in a certain intensity he brought to everything he did, a tendency to commit fully to whatever was in front of him. Teachers and peers alike noticed that Charlie had something, a presence, a quality that made people pay attention to him even when he wasn't trying to demand it. But alongside that natural charisma, there were also early signs of a restlessness that would define much of his adult life, an appetite for experience and stimulation that sometimes ran ahead of his better judgment. He developed a love of baseball during his childhood that was genuine and deep, and for a time it seemed plausible that he might pursue the sport seriously. He was talented enough on the diamond to imagine a future in it, and the discipline and structure of athletic training suited certain parts of his personality.
But the pull of acting was always stronger. And as he entered his teenage years, it became clear that the path his father had walked was the one Charlie intended to follow. Though he would do so in his own way, on his own terms, and with an approach to both success and failure that was entirely his own. Before Charlie had even finished high school, he had already begun taking steps toward a professional career. He appeared in a student film, not the famous Francis Ford Coppola film starring his father, but a student project. And the experience of being in front of a camera, of delivering lines and inhabiting a character in a real production setting only deepened his conviction that this was his future. He was 17 when he first began pursuing professional opportunities in earnest, and his last year of high school was marked more by that pursuit than by academic achievement. He was eventually dismissed from Santa Monica High School just weeks before graduation due to poor attendance and grades, a development that foreshadowed a lifelong pattern of operating just outside the boundaries of conventional expectation. His father's connections opened certain doors, but Charlie was determined from early on to establish himself as more than simply Martin Sheen's son. The name he chose for his professional career, Charlie Sheen, derived from his father's stage name, was both a nod to family lineage and an assertion of independent identity. He was not trying to hide from the Estevez heritage, but he understood that in Hollywood, perception mattered, and he wanted to be perceived as his own entity, someone whose talent stood on its own merits and whose name carried its own weight. That determination would serve him well in the years immediately ahead, as he began accumulating credits and building toward the breakthrough that would make him one of the most recognizable faces in American entertainment. Charlie Sheen made his first significant on-screen appearance in a small but memorable role in the 1984 film Red Dawn, directed by John Milius. The film, a Cold War thriller about a group of American teenagers who take up arms against a Soviet invasion of their hometown, featured an ensemble cast that included Patrick Sees, C. Thomas Howell, and Leah Thompson. Charlie's role was modest, but the experience of working on a major studio production alongside established and emerging talent gave an invaluable education in how professional film sets operated, how hierarchies functioned, and what it took to hold your own when the cameras were rolling and the pressure was real. He absorbed everything, watched everyone, and left the production with a clearer sense of what kind of actor he wanted to become. The following year, in 1985, he appeared in The Boys Next Door, a dark drama that allowed him to demonstrate a range that his Red Dawn appearance had only hinted at. But it was in 1986 that everything changed. That year, Charlie Sheen was cast by Oliver Stone in Platoon, a film that would not only define Charlie's career, but would also come to be regarded as one of the most important American war films ever made. Stone, himself a Vietnam veteran, brought an authenticity and ferocity to the project that was unlike anything being produced in Hollywood at the time, and he demanded from his actors a level of commitment and physical endurance that pushed everyone involved to their limits. The cast of Platoon underwent genuine military training before filming began in the Philippines, living in harsh conditions, enduring sleep deprivation, and building the kind of camaraderie and physical exhaustion that Stone believed was essential to capturing the truth of combat.
Charlie threw himself into the preparation with a seriousness that impressed his director and his co-stars, which included Tom Berenger, William Dafoe, Forrest Whitaker, and John C. McKinley. He played Chris Taylor, a young idealistic soldier who volunteers for service in Vietnam and finds himself caught between two opposing forces, one represented by the brutal Sergeant Barnes and the other by the more moral Sergeant Elias, that come to embody the war's essential moral conflict. Charlie's performance in Platoon was extraordinary. He anchored the film with a naturalism and emotional authenticity that felt genuinely lived in, and his work helped give Stone's vision its human core. The film was a massive critical and commercial success, earning more than $138 million at the box office against a budget of roughly $6 million. It won 4 Academy Awards, including Best Picture and Best Director, and it announced Charlie Sheen to the world, not merely as Martin Sheen's son, but as a talent of real substance. Critics praised his performance.
Audiences responded to his screen presence, and Hollywood took notice in the way that only box office success and awards validation can produce. The momentum from Platoon carried directly into another Oliver Stone collaboration the following year. In 1987, Charlie appeared in No Man's Land, a crime thriller in which he played an undercover cop who infiltrates the world of luxury car theft. In 1988, he starred in Young Guns, a Western ensemble piece alongside Emilio Estevez, one of the rare occasions on which the two brothers shared screen time in a major production, as well as Kiefer Sutherland, Lou Diamond Phillips, and other members of the so-called Brat Pack. The film was commercially successful and showed audiences a different side of Charlie's range, one that was lighter and more playful than the intensity of Platoon or Wall Street. That same year brought 8 Men Out, John Sayles' meticulous historical drama about the 1919 Black Sox scandal, in which 8 members of the Chicago White Sox were accused of intentionally losing the World Series in exchange for payment from gamblers. Charlie played outfielder Happy Felch, and once again he demonstrated the ability to subordinate his natural charisma to the demands of a character, to disappear into a period setting and make it feel genuine. The film was critically acclaimed, and Charlie's performance was praised for its restraint and specificity. In 1989, he starred in Major League, a comedy about a ragtag group of misfits on the Cleveland Indians baseball team who discovered that their new owner is deliberately trying to make them lose in order to break their lease and move the franchise. Charlie played Ricky Vaughn, a pitcher with blazing speed, questionable control, and a pair of thick-framed glasses that became iconic. The film was a massive commercial success, generating genuine affection from audiences and becoming one of the most beloved sports comedies of its era.
Those who worked with him during the Platoon period and the Wall Street period recall a young man who was talented and dedicated on set, but who was also living at a pace that made many people around him quietly uneasy. Throughout the late 1980s and into the 1990s, Charlie's personal life was increasingly characterized by a kind of controlled chaos. Controlled enough that he continued to work productively and maintain a career. Chaotic enough that stories of his off-screen behavior began to accumulate in ways that complicated his public image and occasionally spilled over into legal and professional consequences. He was known to be a heavy user of cocaine during this period, a drug that was endemic in Hollywood during the 1980s, and that carried with it a particular kind of social glamour that made its dangers easy to minimize and its pleasures easy to rationalize. The stimulant properties of cocaine seemed, in the short term, to fit naturally with the rhythms of his personality, his restlessness, his appetite for intensity, his difficulty sitting still when stillness offered nothing. He entered rehabilitation for the first time in 1990 at the age of 24, a step that reflected both the seriousness of his situation and a genuine desire to address it. He spoke afterward about the experience in terms that suggested real understanding and real commitment, and for a period it seemed that the intervention had taken hold. He continued working, continued producing commercially successful films, and maintained the outward appearance of a man who had confronted a problem and moved past it. But the underlying dynamics that had driven the behavior in the first place had not been resolved, and the sobriety proved difficult to maintain in an environment that offered constant temptation and very little structural support for the kind of sustained behavioral change that genuine recovery requires. The 1990s were marked by repeated cycles of this pattern, periods of relative stability followed by periods of escalating use, public incidents, private consequences, and renewed attempts at treatment. He sought help multiple times across the decade, and each time the effort was sincere, even if the results were ultimately insufficient to break the cycle entirely. The people who knew him best during this period describe a man who was in genuine conflict with himself, who understood on one level what was happening to him and wanted to change it, while on another level was unable or unwilling to surrender the behaviors that had become central to how he managed his emotions and his sense of identity. His legal troubles during this period were significant. In 1990, a woman named Kelly Preston, who later married John Travolta, alleged that Charlie had accidentally shot her in the arm at his home in an incident involving a firearm.
The charges were ultimately not pursued, and Preston maintained that the shooting was accidental, but the episode drew unwanted attention and contributed to a growing perception that Charlie Sheen's personal life was a source of ongoing instability. There were other incidents across the 1990s involving allegations from women, legal disputes, and public confrontations that kept his name in the tabloids and tested the patience of studios and networks that continued to work with him because his commercial value remained undeniable. In 1995, Charlie became caught up in one of the highest-profile legal scandals of the decade when he was named as a client of Heidi Fleiss, a woman who ran a high-priced prostitution ring in Los Angeles that catered to wealthy and prominent clients. He testified in the Fleiss trial, acknowledging that he had paid for the services her operation provided, and the admission generated enormous media coverage and public scrutiny. It was a profoundly humiliating experience in some respects, and yet Charlie navigated it with a combination of deflection and dark humor that would become characteristic of his approach to public scandal, acknowledging enough to avoid the appearance of total denial, while never fully surrendering to the shame that most public figures would have performed in similar circumstances. The early 2000s brought a brief period of relative stabilization, particularly after his marriage to Denise Richards in 2002 and the birth of their daughters. Fatherhood seemed to offer him something to organize his life around, a reason to moderate behaviors that had long since become habitual, and those who observed him during this period noted that he appeared genuinely invested in building a family life that could coexist with his professional success. The marriage to Richards coincided with the launch of 2.5 Men, and for a period, the professional and personal trajectories seemed to be running in the same positive direction simultaneously.
Those who worked with him during the Platoon period and the Wall Street period recall the young man who was talented and dedicated on set, but who was also living at a pace that made many people around him quietly uneasy. Throughout the late 1980s and into the 1990s, Charlie's personal life was increasingly characterized by a kind of controlled chaos, controlled enough that he continued to work productively and maintain a career. Chaotic enough that stories of his off-screen behavior began to accumulate in ways that complicated his public image and occasionally spilled over into legal and professional consequences. He was known to be a heavy user of cocaine during this period, a drug that was endemic in Hollywood during the 1980s and that carried with it a particular kind of social glamour that made its dangers easy to minimize and its pleasures easy to rationalize. The stimulant properties of cocaine seemed in the short term to fit naturally with the rhythms of his personality, his restlessness, his appetite for intensity, his difficulty sitting still when stillness offered nothing. He entered rehabilitation for the first time in 1990 at the age of 24, a step that reflected both the seriousness of his situation and a genuine desire to address it. He spoke afterward about the experience in terms that suggested real understanding and real commitment. And for a period, it seemed that the intervention had taken hold. He continued working, continued producing commercially successful films, and maintained the outward appearance of a man who had confronted a problem and moved past it. But the underlying dynamics that had driven the behavior in the first place had not been resolved, and the sobriety proved difficult to maintain in an environment that offered constant temptation and very little structural support for the kind of sustained behavioral change that genuine recovery requires.
Martin Sheen, his father, has spoken in recent years about his son with the combination of pain, love, and hard-won acceptance that only a parent who has watched a child struggle for decades can fully articulate. The bond between them has survived everything, and Charlie has consistently spoken about his father with a reverence and an affection that suggests the relationship remains one of the most important anchors in his life. That continuity of family connection, imperfect, complicated, tested repeatedly, represents perhaps the most meaningful form of stability that Charlie Sheen has managed to preserve across a life that has contained more turbulence than most people will ever know. He turned 58 years old in September 2023, and whatever the next chapter of his life holds, the chapters that have already been written constitute one of the most dramatic, instructive, and genuinely human stories in the history of American entertainment. A story about talent and waste, about resilience and self-destruction, about the way that fame amplifies everything, including the qualities in a person that most urgently need to be protected from: amplification. Charlie Sheen has been many things to many people across many decades, but above all, he has been undeniably, irreducibly himself. And that, for better and for worse, is more than most people ever manage to be. And that is the story of Charlie Sheen, a man who burned brighter than almost anyone and somehow found a way to keep going. If this story moved you, if it made you think, if it reminded you that even the most extraordinary lives are built from very ordinary pain, then take a second right now and leave a like. It costs you nothing and it means everything to this channel. And if you are not subscribed yet, hit that button. New stories like this one are waiting for you and you do not want to miss them. Now, before you go, drop a comment below and tell us what city are you watching from today.